Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today. This is again coming from the test server, part of episode 41, House of Legends. We now have a release date, which is going to be this Wednesday, the 25th, after probably like an 8 or 10 hour touch cooldown. So it's basically downtime. So it's essentially going to be the 25th in the evening, if not the 26th. But I wanted to bring you a video detailing all the changes to the ally system since I last shared one, which is basically on the release date. So it's been a couple weeks since that video, and I wanted to bring you the updated one. To touch things off, there's been two technically major changes, besides all the passives working correctly for most part. But on August 18th, there was a hotfix that said reduced ally damage, so Flash, Zoom, and Aquaman damage decreased by 20%. And all other allies increased by 10%. And then August 23rd, which is basically yesterday, as of the recording this video, or the most important change is made, or the most crucial one. Now allies are no longer 120-second cooldown; they are now 90 seconds. So all the cooldowns were reduced by 30 seconds on every single ally, and then with the Aquaman supercharged passive, it's 78 seconds cooldown. So we'll touch on that, but I wanted to bring you the damage aspects first. So right away, the previous build damage, this is basically the damage you saw in that first video, and then basically this is me retesting it throughout all AoE. And then the changes, the numbers that I got from that previous build. So if we go back to that August 18th hotfix, Calculator bot and Oracle bot should have gone up by 10% damage, but they didn't. House of Legends bot did. I mean, it's still, these are all tested at CR339, so it's going to be, you're going to be seeing more damage than this on live server, more than likely, because they're going to be max CR342 or near it. So that's why these are CR dependent. Or they scale with not only the star level, but also your CR as well. So the max CR for this episode, which I'll touch on my next video, which is everything you need to know, just kind of spoilers, 348. So when you're max CR, these will be doing much higher damage than what you see here. But for the sake of, comparative sake, they're all 339. So Oracle bot 222, 261, and 224. I mean, obviously House of Legends did a lot more damage because for some reason Calculator bot and Oracle bot didn't get that 10% increase. Why? I have no idea. House of Legends is single target anyway, but the House of Legends does have that nice power passive, so it's most likely you'd want to level that regardless in terms of Calculator and Oracle bot. But once again, those should have seen damage increases. Looking at Cyborg and the epics, same thing. So Flash, Zoom should have decreased by 20%. Zoom only decreased by 10%, and Flash reduced by 10%. So they should have been another 10% reduction. Flash, I'm not even sure why. I mean, Flash is 217k damage, and now it's 241. Or sorry, the previous build was 241, now it's 217. So I mean, 200k damage, big whoop. Zoom, on the other hand, still doing 1 million damage at max level. So it's down from 1.2 to 1 million. Oh, great. The issue is here with a cooldown of 90 seconds. Every 90 seconds, every single player in the group, healer, controller, tank, all the DPS, can now do 1 million plus damage AoE with the Zoom. So that's a bit ridiculous. There's no reason why that should be the case. And I mean, the cooldown reduction in the hotfix notes was that so that the damage would be increased. So why on earth would any player ever level Flash when it costs all the same, like the XP and Catalyst and all the XP hasn't changed since my previous video. The Epic Catalyst here, so Epic Alliance 15 source marks, Quantum Field Energy, yada. But the Legendary Catalyst right here, a Legendary Alliance, this now drops off endgame content. So the Rare and Epic Alliance, as far as we know, we're still purchasing from the Cyborg vendor for source marks. That don't drop, or for the marketplace, but the Legendary Alliance was not on that vendor, but it's going to drop in open world endgame content, so there at least there's that to look forward to. But in terms of needing like 300k XP, 75.6 and 8500, that hasn't changed since the beginning. All the XP requirements are still the same, so everything is the same as Flash for 200k, but with Zoom you get 5 times the damage of Flash. So why on earth would you ever level Flash when you get 5 times the damage for the exact same amount of marks? And the Flash passive is ridiculous anyway. Not that the Zoom is much better, but and then Cyborg is still going to be the best for single target. I mean, Cyborg, I swear to God, is the most inconsistent thing to test I have ever seen in this game. Like, I probably spent an hour and a half just trying to get these results. Just these 8 results. Because Cyborg, he'll determine, I don't even know what determines it. You'll see this all over the place. Like, sometimes it didn't change. Sometimes it went up by like 30%. Sometimes it went up by 15%. All over the place. Because I'll be limiting every single variable. I'm the same distance away from the target. I'm standing the exact same position. I'm targeting on the same ally. Like, nothing's changing. But each time I summon Cyborg, it'll be like 13, 10, 9, 8, 7, 14, 12 hits. Like, I spent an hour and a half just trying to get 13 hits so I could have an equal comparison. It was absolutely ridiculous. That's on AoE single target. Even single target, the same thing. Cyborg's hit counters are all over the place because he basically just decides how many projectiles to fire. And then it's still the same thing like as a directly in line of sight. But, I mean, Cyborg is still going to be the best for single target over Zoom. That hasn't changed. Now, in terms of Batman and Aquaman, so technically Aquaman, once again, his damage should have been decreased by 20%. It only went down by 5%. So, not that Aquaman was, once again, even that powerful. I mean, even a legendary ally, which is like 300% more XP and catalyst. Like, so to get Zoom, you only need 68 catalysts and 75.6k XP. And to get Batman and Aquaman, everything is 300k and 272 catalysts. And you only get like 250k damage. And like the Batman one, it's going to be a little bit tricky because his grenades don't stun anymore. So the way he fires his grenades are pretty spread out. So if it's a big group of ads, and the third grenade will hit. And that's why you see like these targets kind of change. And the hit counts kind of change because it all depends if that at that last grenade hits the target or not. If it does, then great, you get the damage from it. If not, then it'll miss. So depending on how the tank has the ads positioned, then that grenade could miss. So it's a little bit inconsistent there, but I want to say it probably either stayed the same or Batman went down by 5%. But once again, compared to the hotfix notes, it should have increased by 10%. So definitely did not increase by 10. And Queen Dianna doesn't do any damage anyway. So it's just these results are weird. Flash is still, Zoom is still like completely broken. Zoom does more damage than every single ally combined. And now it's a 90-second cooldown from 120. What? And there's still the weird little thing where if you summon Emperor Aquaman too far away from the ads, he just stands around and does nothing for some reason. Every other ally is pretty good about targeting it, depending on range. But, I mean, I'm not even that far away. I'm like maybe 15 meters or so, 15, 20 meters. And he just sits around and doesn't attack. So I'd almost want to say you have to be mid-range to properly use Aquaman. Just FYI. It could be different in content because I've never used Aquaman's attack ability in content. Because why would you? If you're missing like 800k damage if you use any other ally except Flash or for Zoom. Sorry. So I mean, this is still really unbalanced. Because I mean, you're gonna have 8 players. You're gonna have like 8 million damage potentially on AoE every 90 seconds. Like that's completely broken for content. And it skews it towards like say like if you care about your damage, which I know some of you are going to care about your damage or like damage comp stuff like that or care about the scorecard, whatever. If you're that type of individual, if you're up against a player that has this maxed out from paying it on day one, you're missing out on 1 million damage against him every 90 seconds for an entire raid. I mean, even short raids like QE, every single like group of ads, he's going to have a summon Zoom for 1 million plus damage. And that's like, a couple supercharges that you're missing out of, essentially. So he's going to have a free 1 million plus damage on every single set of ads that you aren't going to. Or even when on the eye summon. When the eye summon, because there's not 90 seconds. Well, there might be 90 seconds between them. But I'm pretty sure the eyes, like if you're in a comp or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it's close to 90 seconds on the eyes. If not every single time, every other time. But that's going to be a free 1 million damage just from him summoning an ally, which you wouldn't have because it's not leveled. So, I mean, just the damage disparity is giant. Even more so that they reduce the cooldowns on them for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know why they just couldn't balance Zoom in terms of everything else. Because, I mean, every other ally is fairly close. I mean, you got like 225, 260, 220. Cyborg's a bit weird, but I mean, he's basically double that. 217, 353, 246. I mean, they're all pretty close together. Cyborg's an outlier because of his projectiles. And then Zoom is just like, whatever. I mean, shrug. So that's what we're looking at now in terms of the damage requirements. I'm hoping these will change because, I mean, if Zoom is released like that, then you're going to have a whole bunch of people paying to level them up, and then they're going to adjust it later. Then they're going to cry nerf that they're wasting money. So it's just, Zoom can't release like that because it's just going to cause way more headaches down the road. That's for sure in terms of balance sake. Other than that, they're all pretty close. It's more like the passives that have the adjustments. But right now, there's no reason at all for any person to use anything else besides Cyborg and Zoom. Cyborg and Zoom for damage are heads and shoulders above everything else. Because Cyborg works well for AoE and is the best on single target, where Zoom works amazing on AoE but is like okay on single target. So Cyborg is and they're pretty much the exact same cost too. So there's no reason to have Flashpoint Batman in terms of damage. There's nothing that's going to do anything special because it's a mix of single target damage and AoE. So if it's not a boss fight, only one of those grenades are going to hit anyway, so it's pointless. Or if it's the same thing with Aquaman, it's a nice, huge, massive stun. But I mean, there's not too many massive rooms where that's going to matter. So it's just, right now it's 2 allies out of 9 that are just heads and shoulders above everything else in terms of damage, which shouldn't be the case. They should at least be equal, and then you get to decide on their passives how to level up. So enough talk about that. I'm pretty sure you understand my point. Let's jump over and retest all the passives. Okay, so we are retesting Calculator Bot's passive for roll aid. So heals small amount on roll. Let's take a look here. We'll aggro these guys. Get some damage taken. Now there should be, it doesn't say it, but there should be an internal cooldown on it. You saw it proc at the start for some reason, even though it didn't actually roll. There we go, 10,286. Keep going until we get the second one, roughly. See if there is an internal cooldown. Probably, I'm guessing, around 30 seconds. 30 seconds to a minute. There's another one, so I'm just going to drop down here for a sec. We're going to take an Omega Cola because I want to see if this is going to be resto dependent. So for now, if we see a change in the numbers, then we'll get to see, because my resto would jump by 5%. And it was a static 10,286 there. You see in the combat log. $10,800. So it is resto dependent. Your resto will increase that. So for your healer, fire tank, etc., then you can expect to see much higher numbers. But that'll be with a base, well, not a base, but 29,325. That's plus that 5%. So we can confirm that it is working. There is an internal cooldown, and it is resto dependent. Okay, so now we're going to be testing House of Legends bots. Support ability, Power Thief. So get power back stunning an enemy NPC. So I'm in healer stance. We're just going to drop a bunch of power, and then I'll be able to stun that Reaper with Arc Lightning because it's a 0 willpower. So we'll hit this, drain everything, and then stun. So that was 24,500 power Thief. Let's just see if I can keep going. And just drain everything. I just want to see if it does that major heal anymore. So now we're going to stun it. 24,500. 555. So it does not give that huge power that it did before. But let's see now if there's a cooldown on it. So I got my power back there. Got my power back there. Got it there. So it's every single time you stun it. So for controllers, for sake, you can pretty much jump your entire power bar, because every time you throw an ability or a debuff, you're going to stun the ad. So it's not a full power bar like it was before, being glitched. Or not glitched, but definitely not working as intended. But now you can pretty much get it back every single time. Now that should rely on stats as well. I still have the Omega active, so it might depend on bit. I don't have a piece of gear that I can swap out with. Well, no, I could wear, I've got a controller in one. So that'll increase my VIT by 500 or so. So we'll see if that changes the power granted back. Oh, didn't stun it that time. 26,312. So that is VIT dependent as well. So the power you receive back is stat dependent, which makes sense, as it would be. But there is the House of Legends power back return mechanic. Okay, so now we're going to be testing Oracle Bot's support ability, Tinker. So just repair gear over time. I got it equipped now. My gear is all sitting at about mid-50s durability. And we'll just take a stroll through Flashpoint Gotham. Just went up in the 60s. And you'll be able to hear the in-game sound of your gear repairing, essentially. So if you have your effects volume turned up high, then you might get a little bit annoyed running this, depending on how damaged your gear is. Jumped up to 63 now. So it does, if I was going to make an observation from my previous test with it, it does repair the gear slower. So it probably does like one durability at a time. Which, I mean, it's still not so much a gimmicky thing, but you can always just go to the vendor and repair your gear. But if you have this and you want to use that feature, 64. So we started about 57 and about 55, 57. Now we're in the mid 60s, low 60s, 65. So I mean, if you have this on during the course of a raid, even after a wipe, by the time you finish the raid or finish the instance, your gear is going to be back up to full. You just have to deal with that gear repair sound continually. So that's going to be Oracle Bot. Okay, so taking a look at a couple of allies first. I'm going to touch on Flash first. Flash's ability reduces time between when you're in combat and return to normal travel speed. This is just awkward to test because in all practical sense, it's a pointless ability. I mean, it's just there. I mean, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, great, question mark. Because if you're in actual content, if an NPC targets you or you're in a raid or something like that, if you're in combat because of an NPC targeted you, this ability is not going to have any effect. Because you either have to kill the NPC or get out of its range, so it's taunt or whatever drops on you. So if you aren't doing that, if you're just sitting there in combat, you're never going to drop. This is more so if you like kill something in open world and drop faster, or possibly it reduces how far how fast it drops if in terms of getting out of range. But in the entire practical sense of it, it's just not going to be useful. It's more like a interesting kind of gimmick. But I can't say for sure if it works or not, because in any sense that I've actually would be using it in terms of content, it's not going to work. Like, for example, it would mean pretty overpowered, but at the same time an interesting ability if it worked in combat. Like, say, for example, the easiest example I can think of is DME. So you start off that raid, you're in the tunnels killing allies or killing NPCs or whatever, but that dot that hits on you keeps you in combat, so you can't run. So that's where super speed is so fast, because they're doing the double tap in movement to go to faster movement speed to get to the next group of allies. I want to keep saying allies, but next group of ads, so they can target and DPS them. So if that dropped combat and you could fast travel or use your movement power, then yeah, that'd make instances like that, or raids that have long tunnels or long hallways, much faster. But it doesn't, because that's not how combat works. So I'm not going to try to show some kind of test for this, because it's self-explanatory, but its actual practicality, and then that's not a word, its actual usefulness is kind of questionable. So let's touch on Zoom. So Zoom Hotfoot increases non-combat movement speed. So they changed this so that it works for normal travel speed and faster movement travel. So I've already tested this. It does work. You do actually feel faster. For example, so we're going to leave Flash on here and just kind of do this. Just, yeah, you can see it. So we'll put Flash on. And then we'll do just travel between here and the next pillar. So each time I tested this, it's usually about 4 seconds. But the thing is, you can actually feel it. Like last time I showed you this, I couldn't feel faster, and that's why I wasn't sure it was working. So we kind of get to the next pillar here. Usually it's about 15, 16 seconds to run that. And then if I put on Zoom now, go back to the first pillar, and now we're traveling. You can actually, it may not translate well on the screen, but I can feel faster. Like, I can feel the way it's running is actually faster. And if I get back here, then we're sitting at about 12 seconds. So it's usually about 4 seconds faster. Same thing if I do like fast movement. So if I go into here, you feel a lot faster running with it on, getting to the next pillar and stopping. So if I took it off, now we'll take it off, put Flash back on. Same thing, and now we'll start fast travel. So it's just, and it was kind of hard to explain. Well, I mean, the numbers, speak to it, that it actually does work. But it's you'll have to get used to it in terms of flight or acrobatics. But you definitely feel faster running Zoom. Now, in what kind of sense does this work? I mean, because it's non-combat. So once again, it's not going to make you faster in a raid if you're in combat. But an open world, or it's going to be great for some of the super speed or flight or acrobatic or skimming races. For example, you can be a lot faster doing that if you haven't got those feats before. But most of the time you're out of combat in those races. But it definitely does work. I found usually about a 4 second difference between normal travel and fast travel. So it's, the difference between, sometimes it can be 3 seconds, but that might just be like a timing bias. But I'm comfortably saying it's about 4 seconds faster from pillar to pillar in terms of running. So it definitely does work as intended. And it's actually nice that it works now for normal speed and fast travel speed. So it's great that it works for both. So, use it as you will. Some instances it will be handy. Other times it won't be. Like, for example, if this worked back in like PvP and Moon map, if you got out of combat, you could just book across with that rock to score it. So stuff like that's going to be interesting, but definitely does. You definitely feel faster, that's for sure, which is always interesting. Okay, so taking a look at Cyborg's passive, all your base. So receive bonus passive power recovery rate when base generators are above 50%. Base generators, that is going to be the one with like your tactical mods, orbital strike, supply drop, sidekick, henchman. Like, as long as that is pretty much, you're always going to have it at 100% anyway, because you're spending source marks. But as long as it's above 50%, then you're fine. So it's a little bit awkward to test it. You can't test on Spartan targets because they get power back. For some reason, Brick wants to be super annoying, and Doomsday just wants to ignore him. So, essentially what I'm going to do here is just, I'm at full power, go and spam Jackhammer and see how many times I can actually get the hit counter up before I run out of power. Doomsday likes to stun me, be annoying. So you can, I'm a spec weapons expert, so I'm designed to go by through quickly power. But I'm getting to about 50, 50, 52. So let's just get out of combat here and recover. So that was about a 50. And just, I'm a spec weapons expert just so I don't have any super powered passive regen. So just so I burn through power a little bit faster. So now we're going to swap to it on. And go back and repeat. Make sure I'm full. And jump in. And as you can see, I'm already approaching 50 and still have plenty of power left. I'm probably going to get to 60s. Yep, 60s, maybe even 70. But about a 70, 72. So you can see the difference there. It's just easily identifiable. So ideally, this is going to work best with power sets like, say, like Atomic, Mental, Light, especially power sets that usually drew a lot of power, especially for Claw Trolls, had issues keeping up with it. Or, Earth and Jackhammer spam. But you can see, even though it's not going to show up as power, you can see right there the passive effects. So I almost got pretty much an extra 20 hits out of it with the same variables. I broke out once because a breakout's going to cost power. Doomsday knocked me out probably about the exact same time, so I broke out. So I had 2 breakouts, and the rest is jackhammer spam. So I mean, yeah, it's not like a perfectly test. I'm sure that there's still some variables not accounted for. But if the sparking targets didn't return power, then this is be much easier to show. But you can see that difference there. You can see, the hit count. I was still at like over a third of power when I was in like a 20-30 hit counter range, where before it was much lower than that. So, a very handy passive. It's nice to Cyborg. Cyborg, you're going to want anyway for single target damage. And then if you're using Zoom for AoE, for example, then you've got like this setup for Zoom AoE, Cyborg for his power passive, and Aquaman, unless you're precision DPS and want to use like Batman or something. But that Cyborg passive is going to be very handy, especially for trollers too. I mean, any healers, controllers, there's plenty of times where you nice to have some passive power return, where it's really easy to upkeep. I mean, there's no reason why anyone shouldn't have this ability already maxed out in terms of your generators. So just a very handy ability. It's not OP like the House of Legends bot giving you power back every single stun, no matter what. But it's nice, just passive return. It's pretty much, I don't have the artifact here, but it's essentially what the Omega Hedron should have been, where it was like if you're below 75% power, you get the X amount of regen, but it never really made sense, or it never really, I think when I tested it, I got like 1 or 2 extra priority heals out of it, because that's where I just spammed priorities and see when I ran out of power. But this is like a much more useful version of the Omega Hedron. So that's Cyborg, all your base.
Luther's science spire.
Okay, so we're going to be taking a look at Batman's.
My guess is they're after something in Luther's database. Let's find out what.
Soul Detective, defense increases when you are solo. Upon activating your weapon buff, heal based on your precision would be combat suture. So let's take a look at our defense here.
I'm sure Lex won't mind if I borrow this.
69,049.
Reminds me of the time those gangsters left me alone in a room with a Tommy gun.
And with Batman equipped.
Guys.
Jumps up to 79,406. Does it show in our effects tab? Probably not. Nope, just the Omega that I took from the previous testing. So, as we saw it there, 79,406. And if we take off Batman, we're to switch it to the second passive. will drop down to 69,049. Okay, so we're taking a look at Flashpoint Batman's Combat Suture, which is upon activating your weapon buff, heal based on your precision. So my prec at the moment, 47,000. Do we even have, we're on the cog on the second test. I don't really have any other prec arts. I'm still kind of spec for might, but either way, little suffice. So we'll take some damage here. So 57k. This does have the ability to crit as well. And we'll see, usually the internal cooldown is that I can't use it again at 12 seconds. Yeah, same thing. Okay, so we'll kind of wander around and survive. So it's going to be every other weapon buff that you can use it. I don't want to die. Same thing, we'll take some more damage. Use it again, another 57k. So what I'll do now is we'll put cog on. And he's gonna die. I'll wait for the second wave. So the cross weapon, my perk jumps up to 73,600. So now it's a 78k heal. Hasn't crit yet, but I know it can. Same thing, so I can wait for the buff to drop after 20 seconds and see. I should be able to hit it then. Not like you're gonna wait your weapon buff, so it's gonna. No, it didn't apply there. So there is an internal cooldown on it. It's probably about 24 seconds then. We'll take this just so I don't die. Kill this wave.
I hate waiting around.
So, I mean, you're not going to save your weapon buff to apply this. You're still going to be using it every 12 seconds to clip regardless for your rotation. But it means that every other weapon buff, you're going to be able to apply it. So, if we take, we'll take some extra damage here. So 71k. And then we'll wait here. See, no heal. Wait the other 12 seconds. As long as I don't die. Oh, didn't heal there. Okay. It's gonna heal in the next one. Whatever. There's the heal. So there's the possible crit there. So as you can see, still very viable. I mean, over 100k heal, that's pretty much your entire health. I mean, 148k, I only have 233k health. So that's more than half your health in one crit. And that's a completely passive ability. You're going to get it regardless because you're going to get it every other weapon buff. So every 24 seconds, essentially, you're going to get a heal for, either a quarter or half your health. So makes alerts without a healer much more easy for prec, any kind of solo open world content. Even for raids like Clock Tower or something where there's like a passive dot damage, then you're basically getting like a free mini page proc every 24 seconds that you don't have to do anything about. You're just taking it as a passive. And it doesn't really interfere with any other passives because if you're using like Aquaman for a supercharge, you're still going to have a free one for Batman's. So there's that passive. Okay, so testing out Queen Diana's support ability, take that. So upon a pull, enemy weapons are debuffed. I'm on a dummy tune that only has this one leveled. In my loadouts, I have grapple line attack, taser pull, and mesmerizing lasso. All pulls as designated by the game. This should be working in a duel, so I'm going to duel myself.
Three, two, one, fight.
So that was one pull. Am I debuffed at all? Nope. Weapon attacks haven't gone down. Nothing's changed in stats. Taser pull. Same thing, nothing has changed. I mean, what I'll do is I'll debuff, or supposedly I'll use a pull. Breakout, and then I'll start attacking. I'm gonna drop off. Gazer. So normal weapon attacks, like 2Ks, crits for 4Ks. Same thing, use a pull again. Still 2Ks, 4Ks. Nothing else has changed in terms of the damage. And this should be working perfectly fine in a duel. There's no reason why this shouldn't be working. Let's take off Gazer here again. Because it doesn't say enemy NPC, it says enemy. So every precedent in the game, this should be working in terms of a duel. I should be able to see something in my combat log. So even if we flip this and I cancel and do myself. So we'll jump out here.
You lose.
Just yet, you guys can see it from the combat log. So I'll duel and accept here. And I got tornado pull on. So it just got pulled. And there's nothing. Current debuff combo counter, that's irregular if you hop into a duel. That's going to happen regardless. It just debuffs everything. But there's nothing, no change to like weaponization rating, weapon DPS, all stays the same after a pull. If I do it again. Same thing, nothing has changed in my stats. So I have no way of knowing if this ability actually works. It doesn't change weapon attack damage, doesn't show up as a current debuff. So this one is still TBD if this passive is actually working as intended. Okay, so we'll be taking a look at Queen Diana's second support ability, which is going to be Don't Weaken. Upon breakout, bonus might increases depending on number of nearby group members. So I've got one group member that's going to be near me. I'm going to stun and break out from that turret. So right now I'm looking at 10,270 might. We're going to wait to get stunned. Oh, it's got to target me. There's a breakout. 10,444. Does it show up in the combat log? Does not. So 10,270. Another breakout, 10,444. So, I mean, the might not scale because this is clamp content. But there's also only one group member as opposed to like 7 in a raid. But at least now we can see that the buff is actually working as intended. You know, it's not going to be a giant increase. Really wish it shows up in the effects tab, but so we'll have to see actual in content if it's going to be more than because you're going to have 7 group members. So I mean, even if it's like 1,400 might, another 1,000 might just from an ally breakout. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It should be a little bit higher considering how how often we don't get to break out during content, but there's plenty of content that does have a lot of permastuns where you're constantly breaking out. So it's more just of like a nice to have. But compared to like, you know, Flashpoint Batman and those precision passives, I mean, this one certainly is lacking. Because it's not going to be like if my group member breaks out, it doesn't impact me. I have to break out and then it impacts that. So, but at least now that it is working as intended, and then actually when we get into a proper raid, we can see actually how strong is the buff itself. But considering Queen Diana is more of a tank ally, and it's a legendary. That is quite the expensive leveling just to have this breakout bonus. So I wouldn't say it's worth it whatsoever, considering this is going to be, a massive amount of XP just to be able to, like if we go to Queen Dianna, if we can, no, I can't pull Fortify. Yeah, so it's, you're looking at 300,000 XP just for that small amount of might buff. So in all practicalness, definitely not worth it in terms of the buff. But say you're a tank tune, you're going to level up Queen Dianna. That's probably going to be your focus anyway because of its primary ability and taunting. So, I mean, if you're like a fire, rage, ice, whatever, atomic, at least you have that passive level that you can get some extra might with, which will help out, fire DPS, rage DPS, stuff like that. So it is beneficial, but not if you're not a tank class, that's for sure. So taking a look at Emperor Aquaman's Hear My Call, summon pets get temporary damage increase. Now, I'm going to kind of go through the pets here. Right now, I'm using Robot Sidekick, which would be a power ability pet. I'm Sorcerer. I'm also going to try out Fury. I'm going to try out Grimorium as well. I'm going to try out like Mother Father box. So basically, what I've been doing now, you can see here, I've been sitting for the past few minutes just with Robot Sidekick up attacking the sparring targets, and nothing's changed in terms of a damage increase. The hit counters change. That's why you see the fluctuation in damage, like 45, 37. That's not Aquaman increasing the damage or Robot Sidekick. That's just the hit counter bias from between parsers. So there's no actual damage increase. Because if we look at like the similar ones, 219 that was 41 hits, 218 that was 41 hits. So it's exactly the same thing. Nothing changes. 42 hits was 234, 233. So in terms of Aquaman affecting Robot Sidekick, in terms of that ability, it's pretty much guaranteed that it does not. Okay, so same thing. I'll just show that it's still active. Hear My Call, summon pets. I'm now doing it with the Grimorium. Same thing, as you can see. Damage isn't changing. The only thing that changes sometimes is the hit counter. Sometimes, you still going to have the parser bias with the beam. But if we say, for example, like 26 hits, 118, 23, 24, 108, 104. So if that had one more hit, that's going to be 108 example. So it's same thing. It's once again, Hear My Call is not confirmed to be not impacting artifact pets. So it didn't affect a power set ability like Robot Sidekick, didn't affect artifact pets. So now we're going to jump over to Fury and see if it impacts that ability pet. Okay, so now we have Fury, same thing, past few minutes we've been doing Fury parses. Ignore the first one, that is only because it had a carryover from Grimorium parses. But, I mean, same thing. I mean, Fury's got full power, attacking consistently, 61, 63 hits, 69, 69, 67, 68. Yeah, an 800k parse, not exactly sure. The max is the exact same thing too. So, I mean, if you had Hear the Call affecting the temporary damage increase, you think at least you'd see one of the max hits change from its main attack. 8 down, jumped down to 5. So, it's still near impossible to determine if this is actually active. But I mean, I can try to take it off. Let's see. That's just a 6. Now we'll just swap it off. So the next parse after the 609 is going to have to be ignored. But I mean, you should, even if it's a temporary damage increase, so it's not going to last the entire time. So you expect to see fluctuations from parse to parse, because the internal cooldown has to be, it can't be much longer than 30 seconds. As a passive ability. Okay, so that's 75. We'll ignore that because that was taking it off. So this next 30-second parse, hopefully it's going to be close to something we've had before in terms of the hit counter. Because, I mean, you're going to have hit count fluctuations here. Just how it works. So 61, 61. So if we go back up here, where I had a 61k parse with 693,000 damage, 61 hits for 14,235. This is here. The call is not active. Took it off, and now I'm at 700, just over 700,000, 61 hits, 14,355 max. So pretty much exactly the same. Like there's hardly any difference between the two. So that's Robot Psychic tested, that's Fury tested, that's Grimorium tested, and still no damage increase, no temporary damage increase. The number is the exact same on Hear the Call. So, I mean, if you're using something like Source Shard or something like a Godwave proc, you can readily see when you get that damage increase. Like you can be able to see the difference in the numbers of that actually applying. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is not the Hear the Call buff is not working as intended, because I should see some kind of separation in the numbers. Because right now I don't have it equipped, and I'm still getting similar numbers. Yeah, the hit count part changes, but I mean the hit counts is what the parser bias is, not the actual damage increase. There's no numbers change. All the max numbers have stayed the exact same. So you think a temporary damage increase would line up at least one of these times in 5-6 minutes of parsing, but nothing. Everything, even like Grimorium, everything stayed the exact same in terms of max. In terms of Robot Sidekick, everything has stayed the same, with or without it that ally being applied. So I think I heard rumors previously that it did work only on like Fury and say like Crystal, but now testing, it's supposed to be working. But now for Fury, I can't see it being applied. So we'll leave it at that. Yeah, okay, so taking a look at Aquaman's second pass, or technically first, but CSAT restart. When a supercharge is used, ally power cooldown is reduced. Now, this has been the major change, and I've talked about it earlier in the video, but they just made all allies 90 seconds cooldown instead of 120 seconds. So I can show you an example now. At least they fixed that, the instant restart. So we'll summon Cyborg, and then we'll basically cycle through the supercharges. Didn't apply anything. So it doesn't instantly reset. What it does is it changes it to about 78 seconds. So 90 seconds is the regular time, so about a minute and a half. And then if you use a supercharge with this ability, with Aquaman's passive, now it reduces the cooldown of your supercharge, or a cooldown of your ally, to a minute and 18 seconds, or about 78 seconds total. So every 78 seconds with Aquaman, you could have zoom out on AoE, Cyborg on single target, just completely the wrong direction to take with allies. That makes them pretty much mandatory for like any kind of DPSing, because I mean, you wouldn't think that the difference between like 120 seconds and 90 seconds, but I mean, that's still a lot. I mean, over the course of an entire raid. And then when you think about like damage checks or boss fights, every 90 seconds or every 78 seconds with that Aquaman passive, the whole entire group, healers, controllers, tanks, doesn't matter, is going to have access to cyborgs and zooms. So you have just like a massive damage influx from allies now. So that's really going to be an issue.